It was February 12th, 2026 at 2:47 a.m. when a dream so vivid and terrifying that I couldn't distinguish it from reality drove me to the Mojave Desert, and there, surrounded by endless sand dunes that rolled like frozen waves under a canopy of stars so thick they looked like diamond dust scattered across black velvet, Jesus appeared before me and revealed that the feeling you've been having, that persistent, gnawing sense that the rapture is imminent, isn't anxiety, isn't paranoia, and isn't coincidence. It's a divine alarm system he's activated in the spirits of his remnant. Not everyone who sees this message is meant to see it. Some will scroll past, some will ignore it. But you've been marked. I need you to understand something before we go any further. I'm Jonathan Rumi. You know me as the man who portrays Jesus in The Chosen, but what I'm about to share with you has nothing to do with acting, nothing to do with scripts, and everything to do with what happened to me in that desert when the temperature had dropped to 43 degrees and my breath came out in visible clouds that seemed to hang in the air like questions waiting for answers. Before I continue, I need to ask you something. Do you have a prayer request? Something you've been carrying that's so heavy you can barely stand under the weight of it anymore? Drop it in the comments right now. I'm going to pray over every single one of them because what Jesus showed me that night, what he's about to show you through my testimony, it's connected to your prayers, to your burdens, to that feeling you can't shake. And listen, if you're someone who's hungry for truth, if you're tired of watered down Christianity that makes you comfortable instead of making you ready, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel isn't for casual believers, it's for the remnant. It's for those who have ears to hear what the Spirit is saying in these final moments. The dream that drove me into that desert, I can still feel it like it happened 5 minutes ago. I was standing in a massive crowd of people, millions of them, and they were all looking up at the sky. But here's what shook me. Half of them were smiling, weeping with joy, reaching upward. The other half were screaming, clawing at the people rising into the air, their faces twisted with a terror so profound it didn't seem human. And in the dream, I heard a voice, his voice, say, "Jonathan, they felt it coming. They all felt it, but only half believed what they were feeling." I woke up with my heart hammering so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. The clock read 2:17 a.m. I tried to go back to sleep. I tried to pray it away. I tried to tell myself it was just the stress of filming, just the weight of portraying Jesus day after day finally getting to my subconscious. But 30 minutes later, I was in my car, driving east out of Los Angeles with no destination in mind, just a compulsion I couldn't resist. The 15 freeway was nearly empty at that hour. The city lights faded behind me, and as I drove deeper into the darkness, that feeling, you know the one I'm talking about, it got stronger. That feeling like something massive is about to happen, like the air itself is pregnant with an event so significant that all of history has been holding its breath waiting for it. I pulled off onto a desert access road I'd never noticed before, even though I've driven that route 100 times. The road was barely more than tire tracks in the sand, and it led me 3 miles into the Mojave, far enough that when I finally stopped the car and killed the engine, the silence was so complete it had texture. It had weight. The temperature had dropped significantly. I could feel the cold seeping through my jacket as I stepped out of the car, and overhead. God, I wish I could make you see what I saw overhead. The stars weren't just visible, they were aggressive in their brightness. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light, and I stood there, my boots crunching on the desert floor, surrounded by sagebrush and creosote that released their sharp, clean scent into the night air. Why am I here? I said it out loud, my voice sounding small and strange in all that vastness. And that's when the temperature changed. I don't mean it got warmer or colder, I mean the quality of the air itself shifted, like the difference between breathing in a room and breathing near the ocean. There was suddenly a presence, a density to the atmosphere that made my skin prickle and my throat tighten. The starlight seemed to concentrate, to gather itself about 30 feet in front of me, and I'm not speaking metaphorically or symbolically. I mean the light literally moved, pulled together like water swirling toward a drain, except it was building upward instead of flowing down. And he was there. Jesus stood before me in the desert, and the light that emanated from him made the stars look dim. But his face carried an expression I'd studied for years, that I'd tried to portray in countless scenes, but had never fully understood until that moment. It was grief mixed with urgency, love mixed with warning, patience stretched to its absolute limit. "Jonathan," he said, and his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the sand beneath my feet, from the air around me, from inside my own chest. "Do you know why you're here?" I couldn't speak. I literally couldn't form words. I fell to my knees, and the desert sand was cold and rough through my jeans, tiny rocks pressing into my skin, but I barely felt it. You're here because you've been feeling it too, he continued, moving closer. With each step he took, the sand beneath his feet seemed to glow, as if the very ground recognized its creator. That sense that time is collapsing, that awareness that something unprecedented is approaching. You've been feeling it for months now, haven't you? I nodded, tears already streaming down my face, making cold tracks on my cheeks in the desert air. Everyone I've marked is feeling it, Jesus said, and now he was close enough that I could see his eyes, eyes that held both infinite compassion and absolute authority. It's not anxiety, it's not the news cycle, it's not political tension or global instability. Those are symptoms, not causes. What you're feeling is the fabric of time itself beginning to tear. You're feeling the birth pangs I warned about, and they're accelerating. He knelt down in front of me, and when he did, a warm wind suddenly swept across the desert, carrying with it a scent I can only describe as alive, like rain and bread and something else, something that doesn't exist in our fallen world. I need you to understand something, he said, his hand reaching out to lift my chin so I had to look directly into his eyes. The enemy has convinced my church that the rapture is a distant event, something theoretical, something to debate in Bible studies and prophecy conferences, but I've been activating an alarm in the spirits of my remnant, a divine restlessness, a holy anxiety that won't let them settle, won't let them get comfortable, won't let them live as if they have unlimited time. The wind picked up, and with it came a sound. At first I thought it was just the wind moving through the desert brush, but then I realized it was voices, thousands of them, maybe millions, all whispering the same thing. How much longer? How much longer? How? Do you hear them? Jesus asked, standing now, his form seeming to grow larger, more radiant. Those are my people, scattered across the earth, all asking the same question. They're the ones who've been feeling what you've been feeling. They wake up at 3 a.m. with their hearts racing. They look at their children and feel a sudden urgency to pray over them. They can't watch the news without feeling like they're watching a countdown clock. They've been called crazy, anxious, obsessed with end times. But they're not crazy, Jonathan. They're awake. He turned and gestured toward the horizon, and as he did, the desert transformed before my eyes. I was still physically in the Mojave. I could still feel the cold, still smell the sage, still hear the absolute silence of the deep desert night, but overlaid on top of that reality was another vision. I saw the earth from above, spinning in space, and across its surface were points of light, millions of them, scattered across every continent. Some were bright, pulsing with intensity, others were dim, flickering, and as I watched, some of the lights went out completely while others suddenly blazed brighter. Each light is one of my children, Jesus explained, his voice now carrying a weight that made my chest ache. The bright ones are those who've responded to the alarm I've placed in their spirits. They're the ones who've stopped living for comfort and started living for readiness. They're the ones who've taken that feeling you've been having and let it transform how they spend their time, how they treat their families, how they pursue me. He pointed to the dimming lights. These are the ones who felt the alarm but explained it away. They went to therapy for their anxiety. They increased their medication. They distracted themselves with entertainment, with busyness, with the same routines that keep them feeling safe and in control. They're still mine, but they're not ready. They're not watching. And then he showed me the lights going out completely, and my heart nearly stopped. These are the ones who heard the alarm and deliberately silenced it, Jesus said, and for the first time, his voice carried an edge of anger. They're the ones who mock the very idea of the rapture. They're the ones who've decided that talking about my return is divisive or unloving or too focused on the negative. They've chosen comfort over truth, and they're leading others into the same deception. The vision faded, and I was back in the desert, on my knees, shaking, partly from the cold, partly from what I'd just witnessed. The stars overhead seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. Why? I finally managed to ask. Why are you showing me this? Jesus sat down on a large rock nearby, and the gesture was so human, so familiar, that it made what he said next even more devastating. Because time is shorter than even my watchmen realize, he said. That feeling you've been having? It's not just a warning that the rapture is coming eventually. It's a warning that the window for preparation is closing. I'm activating this alarm in my remnant because the birth pangs are no longer occasional contractions. They're coming faster, harder, closer together. Anyone who's witnessed a birth knows what that means. He stood again, and the wind picked up once more. now strong enough that I had to squint against the sand it carried. "I'm going to show you something else," he said, "and I need you to share it exactly as you see it, no matter how controversial, no matter how many people call you a fearmonger or accuse you of date setting." He raised his hand, and the sky above us, that vast expanse of stars and darkness, suddenly filled with images like a cosmic movie screen. I saw churches, thousands of them, and they were full of people singing, praying, going through the motions of worship. But as I watched, I realized that in most of these churches, the people were asleep. Their eyes were open, their mouths were moving, but they were spiritually unconscious. "They've been lulled to sleep by comfort," Jesus said, his voice now carrying a grief so profound I felt it in my bones. "They think they have time. They think the rapture is something their grandchildren might see. They're making plans for next year, for 5 years from now, for retirement, and all the while the alarm I've placed in the spirits of my remnant is screaming that time is collapsing." Then he showed me a smaller group, much smaller, scattered throughout those same churches and beyond them. These people were different. They had an intensity in their eyes, a focus, a readiness. They were the ones staying after service to pray. They were the ones fasting. They were the ones having uncomfortable conversations with family members about eternity. They were the ones who couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. "These are my bride," Jesus said, and his voice filled with such love that I started weeping again. "These are the ones who've let the alarm I placed in them transform their lives. They're not living in fear. They're living in readiness. They're not panicking. They're preparing. And when I come, they won't be surprised. They'll be expecting me." The vision faded, and the desert returned to its natural state, cold, dark, vast, and silent except for the wind. Jesus looked at me with an intensity that made me feel like he was looking through me into every hidden corner of my soul. "Tomorrow night," he said, "come back here. Same time. I have more to show you. Things about why the alarm is intensifying, about what's coming in the days ahead, about how to help my people understand that what they're feeling isn't something to medicate or ignore, but something to obey." And then he was gone. Not gradually, not with a fade, just gone. The concentrated light dispersed back into the stars, and I was alone in the desert at 4:23 a.m., shaking with cold and awe and terror and hope all mixed together. I sat there for another 20 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The sand beneath me had retained some warmth where he'd been standing, and I crawled over to that spot, pressing my hands against it, needing some physical confirmation that what I'd experienced was real. As the first hint of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, turning it from black to deep purple, I made my way back to my car. My legs were shaking, my mind was reeling, but one thing was absolutely clear. I had to share this. I had to tell you. Because if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, you're one of the ones feeling it. You're one of the lights I saw, and Jesus wants you to know. It's not a coincidence. It's not anxiety. It's not paranoia. It's him, calling you to readiness, calling you to wake up, calling you to understand that the time is shorter than you think. Tomorrow night, I'm going back to that desert, and tomorrow I'll tell you what else he showed me, the specific signs that the alarm is intensifying, the reasons why it's getting stronger, and what you need to do in response. But right now, I need you to do something. I need you to stop and pray. Ask him if what I'm sharing is true. Ask him if you're one of the ones he's marked with this divine alarm. And then, this is crucial, I need you to leave a comment. Tell me you're feeling it too. Tell me you're ready to hear more. Tell me you're not going to ignore this message. Because not everyone who sees this is meant to see it. But you've been marked. And what happens next depends on whether you respond to the alarm or silence it. I'll see you tomorrow night, same time, same place. Jesus has more to reveal and you need to hear it. The entire day of February 13th, 2026, I couldn't focus on anything. I tried to work, tried to return emails, tried to have normal conversations, but every thought circled back to that desert, to those words, to the weight of what I'd been shown. By 11 p.m., I wasn't even pretending to wait until 2:47 a.m. I got in my car and drove straight back to the Mojave, arriving at the same spot just after midnight. The temperature was even colder than the night before, 38 degrees according to my car's display, and the wind had picked up significantly. It wasn't the gentle breeze of the previous night. This was a persistent, searching wind that seemed to move through the desert with purpose, bending the sagebrush and sending small spirals of sand dancing across the hardpan. I'd brought a heavier jacket this time, and a flashlight, though I'm not sure why. The stars provided more than enough light to see by, and something told me that where I was going, a flashlight would be irrelevant anyway. The moon was a thin crescent, hanging low on the western horizon like a silver fingernail, and the darkness was so complete that the desert seemed to extend infinitely in every direction. I walked further out than I had the night before, maybe half a mile from where I'd parked, until I found a small rise in the landscape, barely 20 feet higher than the surrounding terrain, but enough to give me a view of the vast emptiness stretching out in all directions. The wind was stronger up there, cutting through my jacket, making my eyes water, carrying with it that sharp, clean scent of desert sage and something else, something like ozone before a lightning strike. I didn't have to wait long. At 12:34 a.m., the air pressure changed. I felt it in my ears, like when you're ascending rapidly in an airplane. The wind suddenly stopped, not died down, but stopped as if someone had flipped a switch. The absolute stillness that followed was more unsettling than the wind had been. Even the usual desert sounds, the distant cry of a coyote, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, all of it ceased. And then he was there, standing about 10 feet away, his presence somehow even more powerful than it had been the night before. The light emanating from him cast long shadows across the desert floor, and I could see every detail of the landscape around us, the individual rocks, the twisted branches of ancient creosote bushes, the patterns the wind had carved into the sand. "You came back," Jesus said, and there was approval in his voice, but also a sadness that made my chest tighten. "I had to," I said, my voice rough. "I haven't been able to think about anything else. What you showed me last night was only the beginning," he interrupted, moving closer. As he walked, I noticed that the sand beneath his feet didn't just glow. It seemed to come alive, each grain catching and reflecting his light like tiny mirrors. "Tonight, I need to show you why the alarm is intensifying. Why that feeling you've been having, that sense of urgency, that awareness that time is collapsing, why it's getting stronger." He gestured toward the eastern horizon, and as he did, the sky began to change. The stars remained, but overlaid on top of them appeared images, scenes, visions that played out across the heavens like a cosmic documentary. "The birth pangs I spoke of in Matthew 24, he said, his voice taking on a teaching quality that reminded me of the Sermon on the Mount scenes we'd filmed for The Chosen, except this was real, this was him, and the authority in his words made the air itself seem to vibrate. "I told my disciples there would be wars and rumors of wars, famines, earthquakes, pestilences. I told them these were the beginning of sorrows, the start of the birth pangs. Do you understand what birth pangs are, Jonathan?" I nodded, but he continued anyway. "They're contractions. They start far apart, relatively mild, manageable. A woman in early labor can still walk around, still talk, still function normally. But as the birth approaches, the contractions come faster, closer together, more intense, until finally they're coming so rapidly that there's barely any rest between them, and everyone in the room knows the baby is coming now, not tomorrow, not next week, now." As he spoke, the visions in the sky intensified. I saw wars breaking out across the globe, not the distant conflicts we've grown accustomed to, but something more widespread, more chaotic. I saw earthquakes, massive ones, striking in rapid succession. I saw economies collapsing like dominoes. I saw diseases spreading. I saw famines. I saw civil unrest erupting in nations that had been stable for generations. But here's what shook me. I saw the dates. These weren't historical events. These were future events, and they were all clustered together, compressed into a time frame so short it made my head spin. "Do you see it?" Jesus asked, his voice urgent now. "Do you see how close together they're coming? The world has been in labor for 2,000 years, Jonathan, but the contractions are now coming so fast, so intensely, that anyone who's paying attention knows. The birth is imminent." The wind suddenly returned, stronger than before, and with it came a sound that raised every hair on my body. It was like a low-frequency hum, felt more than heard, vibrating through the ground beneath my feet and resonating in my chest. The desert around us seemed to respond to it, the sagebrush bending in unison, the sand rippling in patterns that looked almost like waves. "This is what I've been trying to tell my church," Jesus said, and now his voice carried a frustration that startled me. "This is why I've activated the alarm in the spirits of my remnant. The signs aren't coming. They're here. They're happening now. They're accelerating. But so many of my people have been taught to ignore their spiritual senses, to dismiss that inner knowing as anxiety or paranoia or end times obsession. He turned to face me directly, and the intensity in his eyes was almost unbearable. You know what the greatest deception of the enemy has been in these last days? He asked. It's not that he's convinced people I'm not coming back. It's that he's convinced them I'm not coming back soon. He's lulled them into a false sense of having unlimited time. He's made them comfortable with delay. He's taught them to mock the very idea of imminence. The visions in the sky shifted, and now I saw churches again, but this time I could hear what was being preached from their pulpits. Pastor after pastor, teacher after teacher, all saying variations of the same thing. Don't worry about the end times. Don't get caught up in prophecy. Focus on the here and now. We've got plenty of time. People have been predicting the rapture for 2,000 years, and they've always been wrong. Do you hear it? Jesus asked, his voice now carrying an edge of anger I'd never heard before. Do you hear how they're putting my people to sleep? They're using wisdom and caution and balance as weapons to disarm my bride, to keep her from watching, from being ready, from living with the urgency this moment demands. I wanted to defend some of those pastors, wanted to say they were just trying to prevent people from falling into date setting or fear-mongering. But before I could speak, he showed me something else. The scene shifted to individual believers, people in their homes, in their cars, at their jobs. I could see inside them somehow, see their spirits, and what I saw broke my heart. They had alarm systems going off inside them, spiritual alarm systems that Jesus himself had installed, but they were actively silencing them. Some were doing it with medication, some with entertainment, some with busyness, some with theology that explained away the urgency they were feeling. These are the ones I'm most grieved over, Jesus said quietly, and I could hear the pain in his voice. They're mine, they're saved, they'll be in heaven, but they're going to be caught completely unprepared because they've spent years explaining away and medicating and ignoring the very alarm system I gave them to keep them ready. He walked to the edge of the rise we were standing on, looking out over the vast expanse of desert that stretched to the horizon. The starlight illuminated the landscape in shades of silver and deep blue, and the shadows cast by the rocks and brush created a pattern that looked almost like a map. Let me show you something else, he said. Let me show you the difference between those who've responded to the alarm and those who've silenced it. He raised his hand, and the desert before us transformed. I was still standing on the same rise, still feeling the cold wind, still smelling the sage, but now I could see two groups of people superimposed over the landscape. The first group was smaller, scattered across the desert like the sagebrush, not clustered together but distributed, each one standing alone but somehow connected. They were awake, alert, watching the horizon with an intensity that was almost physical. They had oil in their lamps. I could see it, literally see it, glowing with a light that matched the light emanating from Jesus himself. These are my wise virgins, he said. These are the ones who felt the alarm and responded. They didn't just acknowledge it, they let it transform how they live. They're not living in fear, but they're living in readiness. They've trimmed their lamps, they've filled their vessels with oil. They're watching, they're waiting, they're ready. Then he showed me the second group, and my heart sank. This group was much larger, but they were all lying down, sleeping, completely unaware of what was happening around them. Some of them had lamps, but the lamps were empty, the oil long since burned away or never acquired in the first place. These are my foolish virgins, Jesus said, and the grief in his voice was palpable. They're mine. They're invited to the wedding, but they're not ready. They felt the alarm. Every single one of them felt it, but they explained it away. They told themselves they had time. They prioritized comfort over preparation. They chose sleep over vigilance. As I watched, a shout suddenly rang out across the desert. Behold, the bridegroom comes. And the first group immediately stood at attention, their lamps blazing brighter, their faces turned toward the horizon with joy and anticipation. But the second group woke up in panic, scrambling, realizing too late that they weren't ready, that their lamps were empty, that they'd squandered the time they'd been given. The vision was so vivid, so real, that I could hear their voices, the wise virgins crying out in joy, the foolish ones crying out in desperation. And then I heard Jesus' voice, not the Jesus standing beside me, but the Jesus in the vision, saying words that made my blood run cold. I don't know you. The vision faded, and I was back in the regular desert, on my knees now, weeping so hard I could barely breathe. The cold wind dried the tears on my face almost as quickly as they fell, leaving my skin feeling tight and raw. Why? I managed to choke out. Why are you showing me this? What am I supposed to do with this? Jesus knelt beside me, his hand on my shoulder, and the warmth that radiated from his touch was like standing next to a fire on a winter night. Because you have a platform, he said gently. Because people listen to you. Because you've portrayed me on screen, and that's given you a voice that reaches millions. And I need you to use that voice to sound the alarm, to wake up my sleeping bride, to help my people understand that what they're feeling isn't something to ignore or explain away. It's something to obey. He helped me to my feet, and as I stood, I noticed that the eastern horizon was beginning to lighten. Not with dawn, it was still hours too early for that, but with something else, a glow that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. The alarm is intensifying, Jesus said, following my gaze. That feeling you've been having, it's going to get stronger. For everyone I've marked, for everyone who's part of my remnant, that sense of urgency, that awareness that time is collapsing, it's going to become almost unbearable. Some will respond by drawing closer to me, by getting their lives in order, by making sure they're ready. Others will respond by seeking out teachers who will tell them what they want to hear, who will assure them they have plenty of time, who will help them silence the alarm. He turned back to me, and in the strange light, the starlight, the glow from the horizon, the radiance emanating from him, his face looked both ancient and ageless, both infinitely patient and urgently insistent. I'm going to tell you something that's going to be controversial, he said, something that will make people angry, that will make them accuse you of fear-mongering and date-setting, but I need you to say it anyway. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The generation that sees all these signs coming together, the wars, the earthquakes, the famines, the pestilences, the moral collapse, the technological convergence, the alignment of nations exactly as prophesied, the rebirth of Israel, the preparation for the third temple, all of it, that generation will not pass away before all these things take place. And Jonathan, you're living in that generation. The people watching this video are living in that generation. The alarm they're feeling isn't a false alarm, it's not premature, it's right on time. The wind picked up again, and with it came that sound, that low-frequency hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. The desert around us seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. I'm not giving you a date, Jesus continued. I'm not telling you the day or the hour. No one knows that except the Father. But I am telling you the season. I am telling you that the fig tree is budding, that summer is near, that the birth pangs are coming so fast and so hard that anyone with spiritual eyes to see knows the baby is coming, not someday, soon. He began to walk away, moving down the rise toward the open desert, and as he did, his form seemed to grow more translucent, more light than solid. Tomorrow night, he called back, his voice carrying clearly despite the wind. Same place, I have more to show you, the consequences of ignoring the alarm, the judgment that's coming for those who've put my people to sleep, and the glory that's waiting for those who've stayed awake. Come prepared, Jonathan. What I show you tomorrow will be the hardest thing yet. And then he was gone, and I was alone on that rise in the Mojave Desert at 3:47 a.m., shaking with cold and conviction and a fear that had nothing to do with being afraid and everything to do with understanding the weight of what I'd been shown. I stayed there until the real dawn began to break, watching the sky slowly lighten from black to deep blue to purple to pink. As the sun finally crested the horizon, flooding the desert with golden light, I saw the landscape clearly for the first time, the vast emptiness, the scattered vegetation, the mountains in the distance, all of it looking exactly as it had looked for thousands of years. But I knew something now that I hadn't known before. I knew that this ancient landscape, this seemingly eternal desert, was about to witness something unprecedented. I knew that the alarm I'd been feeling, that you've been feeling, wasn't a malfunction. It was a warning, a call to readiness, a divine urgency that demanded a response. As I walked back to my car, my legs stiff from kneeling in the cold, my face raw from the wind and the tears, I thought about you, about whoever's watching this, about the fact that you've made it this far, that you haven't clicked away, that something in you is resonating with what I'm sharing. That's not a coincidence. You're one of the ones he's marked. You're one of the ones feeling the alarm. And the question isn't whether the alarm is real. It is. The question is what you're going to do about it. Are you going to respond like the wise virgins, letting the urgency you feel transform how you live, how you pray, how you prepare? Or are you going to explain it away, medicate it, distract yourself from it until it's too late? I need you to do something right now before you click away from this video. I need you to get alone with God. I don't care if it's in your car, in your bathroom, in your backyard, and I need you to ask Him if what I'm sharing is true. Ask Him if you're one of the ones He's marked. Ask Him if the feeling you've been having is His alarm system trying to wake you up, and then I need you to leave a comment. Tell me what He shows you. Tell me you're feeling it too. Tell me you're ready to hear what He shows me tomorrow night, even if it's hard, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it challenges everything you've been taught about having plenty of time. Because tomorrow night, I'm going back to that desert, and what Jesus shows me next, the consequences, the judgment, the glory, it's going to make everything I've shared so far look like the introduction. The alarm is sounding, the birth pangs are accelerating, the bridegroom is coming. The only question is, will you be ready? February 14th, 2026, Valentine's Day. While the rest of the world was celebrating romance and love, I spent the entire day in a state of dread mixed with anticipation that I can barely describe. The previous 2 nights had shaken me to my core, but something told me that what was coming tonight would be different, heavier, more final. I didn't wait until midnight this time. By 10 p.m., I was already parked at the same spot in the Mojave, sitting in my car with the heater running, watching the temperature gauge drop 34 degrees and falling. Through the windshield, I could see the stars emerging as the last light faded from the western sky, and that feeling, that alarm that Jesus had been explaining to me, it was so strong now that my hands were shaking. I'd spent the day reading the comments on the previous videos, and what I saw there both encouraged and terrified me. Thousands of you were saying the same thing. I've been feeling this too. I thought I was going crazy. I wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing and a sense that time is running out. My family thinks I'm obsessed with the end times, but I can't shake this feeling. But there were other comments too, angry ones, mocking ones, people accusing me of fear-mongering, of being irresponsible, of leading people into anxiety and date setting. Some were from pastors telling me I was doing damage to the body of Christ. Others were from believers who insisted that focusing on the rapture was a distraction from the real work of the gospel. Those comments bothered me more than the outright hostile ones, because I recognized the spirit behind them. It was the same spirit Jesus had shown me in the visions, the spirit of slumber, of complacency, of explaining away the urgency that the Holy Spirit was trying to create. At 11:47 p.m., I got out of the car. The cold hit me immediately, even through my heavy jacket and gloves. The wind had died down completely, leaving an eerie stillness that made every sound seem amplified, the crunch of my boots on the desert floor, the rustle of my jacket, even my own breathing. I walked to the same rise I'd been to the previous 2 nights, but this time I kept going, climbing higher up a rocky outcrop that jutted from the desert floor like a broken tooth. It took me 15 minutes to reach the top, my breath coming in visible clouds, my fingers numb despite the gloves. But when I finally stood at the summit, the view was breathtaking. The desert stretched out in every direction, silver and black under the starlight, the mountains in the distance looking like the edges of the world. The Milky Way was a river of light overhead, and the silence was so profound it felt sacred, like standing in an ancient cathedral. I checked my phone 12:13 a.m., February 15th now, technically, and as I stood there looking out over that vast emptiness, I felt it, that change in air pressure, that shift in the quality of the atmosphere that I'd come to recognize as the precursor to His presence. But this time was different. The temperature didn't just change, it plummeted. I could see my breath coming out in thick clouds now, and frost began forming on the rocks around me, glittering in the starlight like scattered diamonds. The stars themselves seemed to brighten, to pulse, and then thunder. Not the distant rumble of a storm, but a crack of thunder so loud and so close that I felt it in my chest, in my bones, in my teeth. The sound echoed off the mountains and rolled across the desert like a physical force, and with it came lightning, not from clouds, there were no clouds, but from the clear sky itself, bolts of pure white light that struck the desert floor in the distance, illuminating the landscape in stark, frozen moments. And then, He was there, but not as He'd appeared the previous 2 nights. Jesus stood before me in glory. There's no other word for it. His form blazed with light so intense I should have been blinded, but somehow I could look directly at Him. His eyes were like flames, His face like the sun at full strength, and His voice, when He spoke, was like the sound of rushing waters, of thunder, of 1,000 voices speaking in perfect unison. "Jonathan," He said, and the rocks beneath my feet vibrated with the sound. "Tonight I show you what comes for those who've silenced the alarm. Tonight I show you the consequences of choosing comfort over readiness. Tonight I show you why the time for warning is almost over." I fell on my face, not in reverence, but because my legs literally gave out. The rocks were freezing against my cheek, and I could feel frost forming on my jacket and my hair, but I couldn't move. The weight of his presence was too much, too heavy, too overwhelming. "Stand up," he commanded, and somehow I found the strength to obey, though my legs were shaking so badly I could barely keep my balance. He raised his hand, and the sky exploded with visions. I saw the rapture, not as a distant theoretical event, but as a real, imminent, catastrophic moment in human history. I saw millions of people suddenly vanish, disappearing from cars, from planes, from hospitals, from homes, from streets. I saw the chaos that followed, the accidents, the panic, the confusion, the terror on the faces of those left behind. But here's what destroyed me. I saw believers left behind, not unbelievers, not mockers, not atheists, believers. People who'd gone to church their whole lives, people who'd prayed and read their Bibles and served in ministries, people who were saved, who were going to heaven but who weren't ready, who weren't watching, who'd silenced the alarm. I saw their faces as they realized what had happened, the horror, the disbelief, the desperate prayers. "Lord, why? I believed in you. I went to church. I served you." And I heard his response, and it made my blood run cold. "I never knew you." "No!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "That's not fair. They believed. They were saved." Jesus turned to me, and the look on his face was a mixture of grief and righteous anger that I'll never forget. "Salvation and readiness are not the same thing," he said, his voice like thunder rolling across the desert. "Many are saved who are not ready. Many have their names in the book of life who have not made themselves ready for the wedding. Many call me Lord who do not know me intimately, who do not walk with me daily, who do not live in constant awareness of my return." The vision shifted, and now I saw the tribulation, the 7 years that followed the rapture. I saw the Antichrist rise to power. I saw the mark of the beast. I saw persecution on a scale that made the Roman Colosseum look merciful. I saw believers, those who'd been left behind, who'd finally woken up, being martyred by the thousands, by the millions. And among them, I saw faces I recognized, people from churches I'd visited, people who'd commented on my videos, people who'd heard the alarm and explained it away, who'd had time to prepare and had chosen comfort instead. "This is what awaits those who sleep," Jesus said, his voice now carrying a weight of judgment that made the air itself feel heavy. "This is the cost of silencing the alarm. Yes, they will be saved, but through fire, through tribulation, through suffering that could have been avoided if they had simply stayed awake, if they had simply responded to the urgency I placed in their spirits." Lightning struck again, closer this time, and in its flash I saw something else. Pastors, teachers, leaders standing before the judgment seat of Christ, and I heard the charges against them. "You put my people to sleep. You told them they had plenty of time. You mocked those who warned of my imminent return. You prioritized comfort and numbers and popularity over truth. You fed my sheep poison disguised as wisdom." The judgment that fell on them was terrible to witness. Not loss of salvation, they were saved, but loss of reward, loss of position, the realization that they'd spent their lives building with wood, hay, and stubble instead of gold, silver, and precious stones. "I hold the shepherds accountable," Jesus said, his voice now like a sword. "Those who've been given the responsibility to keep my people awake, to sound the alarm, to prepare my bride. They will answer for every soul they lulled to sleep, for every warning they dismissed, for every urgency they explained away." The vision faded, and I was back on the rocky outcrop, gasping for air, my face wet with tears that were freezing on my cheeks. The stars overhead seemed to spin, and for a moment I thought I was going to pass out. But Jesus wasn't done. He moved closer, and as he did, his form shifted, becoming less overwhelming, more approachable, though no less powerful. He sat down on a large boulder, and the gesture was so human, so familiar, that it created a strange contrast with the glory still radiating from him. "Do you understand now why the alarm is so urgent?" he asked, his voice gentler now, but still carrying absolute authority. "Do you understand why I've been intensifying that feeling in the spirits of my remnant? It's not to create fear, it's to create readiness. It's not to make them anxious, it's to make them alert. It's not to distract them from living. It's to help them live with purpose, with urgency, with the awareness that time is short." I nodded, unable to speak, my throat too tight with emotion. "The birth pangs are accelerating," he continued, standing now and walking to the edge of the outcrop. As he moved, The frost on the rocks melted, leaving trails of water that glittered in the starlight. Every day they come faster, harder, closer together. The wars, the earthquakes, the famines, the pestilences, the moral collapse, the technological convergence, all of it is accelerating at a pace that should be obvious to anyone who's watching. He turned back to me, and in the starlight, I could see his face clearly now. The face I'd studied for years, that I'd tried to portray on screen, but had never fully understood until these 3 nights in the desert. But here's what I want you to understand, Jonathan, and what I want everyone watching this to understand. The alarm I've placed in your spirits isn't just a warning of judgment, it's an invitation to glory. The sky suddenly changed. The visions of tribulation and judgment faded, replaced by something so beautiful it made everything I'd seen before pale in comparison. I saw the wedding supper of the Lamb. I saw the bride of Christ, radiant, spotless, ready, entering into joy unspeakable. I saw rewards being given to those who'd stayed awake, who'd kept their lamps filled, who'd lived in constant readiness. I saw the look on their faces, not relief at having escaped judgment, but pure joy at finally being united with the one they'd been watching for, waiting for, preparing for. And I saw Jesus, not in judgment, not in warning, but in celebration, in love, in the fulfillment of the promise he'd made 2,000 years ago. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. This is what the alarm is calling you to, Jesus said, his voice now filled with such love and longing that it made my chest ache. Not just escape from judgment, but entrance into glory. Not just avoidance of tribulation, but participation in celebration. Not just survival, but reward. He walked back to where I stood and placed his hand on my shoulder, and the warmth that radiated from his touch drove away the cold, drove away the fear, drove away everything except an overwhelming sense of love and purpose. The time for warning is almost over, he said quietly. The door is still open, but it's closing. The oil is still available, but the merchants are closing their shops. The alarm is still sounding, but soon it will be replaced by the trumpet. And when that trumpet sounds, Jonathan, it will be too late for preparation. It will be too late for getting ready. It will be too late for filling your lamp. Lightning flashed again, and in its light I saw the eastern horizon beginning to glow. Not with dawn, it was still hours too early, but with something else. Something that made every cell in my body stand at attention. Do you see it? Jesus asked, pointing toward the glow. That's not the sun rising, that's the sign of my coming. It's not here yet, but it's close. So close that those with spiritual eyes can already see the first hints of its approach. He began to fade, his form becoming translucent, more light than solid, but his voice remained clear and strong. Tomorrow night, he said, I'll show you what to do. I'll give you practical steps, specific instructions for how to respond to the alarm, how to help others wake up, how to make sure you're ready. But tonight, I needed you to see the stakes. I needed you to understand why the urgency you're feeling isn't something to explain away or medicate, it's something to obey. And then he was gone, and I was alone on that rocky outcrop in the Mojave Desert at 2:47 a.m., surrounded by melting frost and fading light, with the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on me like a physical force. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the frost to completely melt, long enough for my tears to dry, long enough for the stars to wheel overhead in their ancient patterns, long enough for the eastern sky to begin its genuine transition from black to deep blue, heralding the actual dawn. As I finally made my way down from the outcrop, my legs stiff and clumsy, my mind reeling from what I'd witnessed, I thought about the comments I'd read earlier, the ones dismissing what I was sharing as fear-mongering, as irresponsible, as damaging to the body of Christ. And I realized something. Those comments proved exactly what Jesus had been showing me. They were evidence of the slumber, of the complacency, of the determination to silence the alarm no matter how loud it got. But they also strengthened my resolve, because for every comment dismissing the warning, there were 10 more saying, I feel it too, I thought I was alone. Thank you for confirming what the Holy Spirit has been telling me. Those are the ones Jesus is calling. Those are the ones he's marked. Those are the ones who will be ready when the trumpet sounds. As I drove back toward Los Angeles, watching the sun rise over the desert in my rearview mirror, I knew that tomorrow night, tonight actually, since it was already past midnight, would be the most important message yet, because seeing the stakes, understanding the urgency, recognizing the alarm, all of that is meaningless without knowing what to do about it. And that's what he promised to show me next. The practical steps, the specific actions, the daily choices that separate the wise virgins from the foolish ones, the ready from the unprepared, those who will hear well done from those who will hear, I never knew you. If you're still watching, if you've made it this far, I need you to do something. I need you to stop right now and ask yourself a hard question. If the trumpet sounded today, if Jesus appeared in the clouds right now, would you be ready? Not, are you saved? Would you be ready? Would your lamp be full? Would you be watching? Would you be living in a way that demonstrates you actually believe he's coming soon? Because the alarm is sounding. The birth pangs are accelerating. The door is still open, but it's closing. And tonight, I'll tell you exactly what Jesus said to do about it. Leave a comment right now. Tell me you're ready to hear it. Tell me you're ready to respond. Tell me you're one of the ones he's marked, and you're not going to silence the alarm anymore, because the time for sleeping is over. The time for comfort is over. The time for explaining away the urgency is over. The bridegroom is coming, and the only question that matters is, will you be ready? It's been 3 days since that final night in the Mojave Desert. 3 days since Jesus showed me the stakes, the judgment, the glory. 3 days of barely sleeping, barely eating, wrestling with how to share what he told me to do, knowing that some of you will dismiss it as too simple while others will reject it as too demanding. But I made a promise. I said I'd tell you everything, exactly as he showed me. So that's what I'm going to do. On the night of February 15th, 2026, I returned to that desert one final time. But this time I didn't go at midnight. I went at sunset, arriving at 5:47 p.m., and I watched as the sky transformed from blue to orange to pink to purple, the temperature dropping with each passing minute as the sun sank below the western mountains. I'd brought supplies this time, a heavy sleeping bag, a thermos of coffee, extra layers of clothing, because somehow I knew this encounter would be different, longer, more intimate, less about visions of judgment and more about practical preparation. The desert at sunset is a different world than the desert at midnight. The rocks and sand that look silver and black under starlight turn gold and amber in the dying light. The shadows stretch long and dramatic, and the temperature, while still cold, has a gentleness to it that the deep night cold lacks. I could hear birds making their final calls before settling in for the night, and in the distance a coyote's howl echoed off the canyon walls. I set up my sleeping bag on the same rocky outcrop where I'd received the most intense visions, and I sat there watching the stars emerge one by one as the sky darkened. Venus appeared first, brilliant in the western sky, followed by Jupiter, and then the countless others, until the Milky Way stretched overhead like a bridge between worlds. At 8:34 p.m., he came. But this time, Jesus didn't appear in overwhelming glory or with thunder and lightning. He simply walked up the path I'd climbed earlier, as if he'd been hiking through the desert and had decided to join me. His appearance was more like the Jesus I'd portrayed in The Chosen, approachable, human, warm, though there was still that unmistakable presence, that authority that made it clear this was no ordinary man. You came prepared, he said, gesturing to my sleeping bag and supplies, a slight smile on his face. I didn't know what to expect, I admitted. The last 3 nights have been intense. Tonight is different, he said, sitting down on a flat rock near where I'd set up. Tonight is about practical application. Tonight is about what you do with everything I've shown you. Because knowledge without action is worthless, and urgency without direction leads only to panic. He looked out over the desert, now fully dark except for the starlight, and was quiet for a long moment. In the silence, I could hear the wind moving through the sagebrush, the distant sound of something small scurrying through the rocks, the vast emptiness that surrounded us. The alarm I've placed in your spirit, in the spirits of all my remnant. It's not meant to paralyze you with fear, he finally said. It's meant to mobilize you into action. It's meant to wake you up to the reality that time is short and every day matters. Every choice matters. Every moment matters. He turned to look at me, and in the starlight, his eyes held both urgency and compassion. So, here's what I'm telling you to do. Here's what I'm telling everyone who's feeling the alarm, everyone who's been marked, everyone who wants to be ready when I return. It's not complicated, but it is demanding. It's not easy, but it is simple. He held up one hand, and as he spoke, it was as if each word was being carved into my mind, into my spirit, with such clarity that I knew I'd never forget them. First, 30 minutes. Every single day, without exception, I want you to spend 30 minutes in my presence with no agenda except to know me, not to get through a Bible reading plan, not to rush through a prayer list, not to fulfill a religious obligation. 30 minutes where you sit in my presence, where you talk to me and listen for my voice, where you let me show you the areas of your life that aren't ready, that aren't surrendered, that aren't aligned with the urgency of this hour. The wind picked up slightly and I pulled my jacket tighter around me, but I didn't take my eyes off him. Most of my people don't know me, he continued, and there was grief in his voice. They know about me. They know theology and doctrine and Bible stories. But they don't know me. They don't recognize my voice. They don't walk in intimate fellowship with me. And that's why I'll say to many on that day, I never knew you, not because they weren't saved, but because they never cultivated a relationship with me that went beyond surface-level religion. He stood and walked to the edge of the outcrop, looking out over the vast darkness of the desert. The wise virgins had oil in their lamps, he said. Do you know what that oil represents? Intimacy with me, the Holy Spirit's presence cultivated through daily, consistent, intimate fellowship. You can't buy that oil at the last minute. You can't borrow it from someone else. You have to cultivate it day by day, moment by moment, through time spent in my presence. I pulled out my phone and started taking notes, my fingers clumsy in the cold, but he stopped me. You don't need to write this down, he said gently. I'm writing it on your heart. You'll remember every word. And he was right. Even now, 3 days later, I can recall every word with perfect clarity. Second, he continued, I want you to examine your life with brutal honesty. I want you to ask yourself, if I returned today, what would I be ashamed of? What would I regret? What would I wish I'd done differently? And then I want you to change those things. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. He turned back to face me, and his expression was intense. The foolish virgins weren't ready because they procrastinated. They thought they had time. They kept putting off the preparation, the surrender, the changes they knew they needed to make. And when the bridegroom came, it was too late. The door was shut. The oil merchants were closed. The time for preparation was over. Lightning flashed in the distance, not the supernatural lightning of the previous nights, but actual heat lightning from a storm system far to the south. In its brief illumination, I could see the landscape stretching out for miles, empty and vast and ancient. What are you tolerating in your life that you know grieves me? Jesus asked, his voice quiet but penetrating. What sins are you excusing? What compromises are you making? What relationships are you maintaining that are pulling you away from me instead of drawing you closer? What entertainment are you consuming that's dulling your spiritual senses? What priorities are you pursuing that have nothing to do with my kingdom? He sat back down, closer to me now, and I could feel the warmth radiating from him, driving away the cold. I'm not talking about legalism, he said. I'm not talking about earning your salvation through works. I'm talking about living like you actually believe I'm coming soon. I'm talking about the natural response of a bride who knows her wedding day is approaching. She doesn't have to be forced to prepare. She prepares eagerly, joyfully, because she loves the bridegroom and wants to be ready for him. The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of rain from that distant storm, and overhead the stars seemed to pulse with light. Third, Jesus said, I want you to warn others, not with condemnation, not with judgment, not with superiority, but with love and urgency. I want you to share what you're feeling, what you're sensing, what I'm showing you. I want you to be willing to be called a fanatic, to be mocked, to be dismissed, because you care more about people being ready than about people thinking well of you. He stood again and began to pace, his movements creating patterns of light and shadow on the rocks. So many of my people are silent, he said, frustration evident in his voice. They feel the alarm, they sense the urgency, they know in their spirits that time is short, but they don't say anything because they're afraid of being labeled as extreme, as unbalanced, as one of those end times people. And meanwhile, their friends, their family members, their church communities are sleeping, unprepared, heading toward a rude awakening that could have been avoided if someone had just been willing to sound the alarm. He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. I'm not asking you to set dates. I'm not asking you to create fear. I'm asking you to share the urgency I've placed in your spirit. I'm asking you to have the uncomfortable conversations. I'm asking you to be willing to be misunderstood if it means even one person wakes up and gets ready. The temperature had dropped further, and I could see my breath coming out in thick clouds, but I barely noticed. Every word he spoke was burning itself into my consciousness. Fourth, he continued, I want you to live with open hands. I want you to hold everything loosely, your plans, your possessions, your comfort, your security. I want you to be willing to let go of anything I ask you to let go of, to go anywhere I ask you to go, to do anything I ask you to do, without hesitation, without negotiation, without delay. He knelt down in front of me, his eyes locked on mine. The rich young ruler went away sad because he couldn't let go of his possessions, he said. How many of my people today are going to miss out on rewards, on intimacy, on readiness, because they can't let go of their comfort, their plans, their control? I'm not asking everyone to sell everything and live in poverty. I'm asking everyone to hold everything with open hands, to be willing to release anything that's competing with me for first place in their hearts. He stood and walked back to the edge of the outcrop, and as he did, the eastern horizon began to glow, not with dawn, it was still hours away, but with that same supernatural light I'd seen on previous nights. And fifth, he said, his voice now carrying a weight of finality, I want you to watch, I want you to stay alert, stay awake, stay aware. I want you to pay attention to the signs, to the birth pangs, to the acceleration of events. I want you to live each day as if it might be the day I return, because one of these days it will be. He turned back to me, and his face was illuminated by both the starlight and that growing glow on the horizon. Watching doesn't mean obsessing over every news headline or trying to calculate dates and timelines, he said. Watching means living in a state of readiness, of expectancy, of joyful anticipation. It means going to bed each night with your accounts settled, your relationships right, your heart clean, your lamp full. It means waking up each morning with the awareness that this could be the day and living accordingly. The glow on the horizon intensified, and now I could see colors in it, gold and amber and rose, like a sunrise, but more vibrant, more alive. Do you see that light? Jesus asked, pointing toward it. That's the sign of my coming. It's not here yet, but it's closer than it was yesterday, closer than it was last week, closer than it was last year. And for those who are watching, who are ready, who have their lamps filled and their lives surrendered, that light represents not terror but triumph, not judgment but joy, not the end but the beginning. He walked over to where I sat and placed his hand on my head, and the warmth that flowed from his touch was like liquid fire, burning away doubt and fear and hesitation. You have 30 days, he said, and his voice was both gentle and absolute. 30 days from today, March 17th, 2026, I want you to have implemented everything I've told you. 30 days to establish the daily 30-minute practice. 30 days to examine your life and make the necessary changes. 30 days to start warning others. 30 days to open your hands and release your grip on comfort and control. 30 days to become a watcher. He removed his hand, and I felt the loss of that warmth like a physical ache. This isn't a suggestion, he continued. This isn't advice you can take or leave. This is a command from your king, an instruction from your bridegroom, a warning from the one who loves you enough to tell you the truth even when it's uncomfortable. The light on the horizon began to fade, and with it, his form began to grow translucent. I'm coming soon, he said, his voice now seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Sooner than most people think, sooner than many are ready for. The alarm you've been feeling isn't a false alarm. It's not anxiety. It's not paranoia. It's my voice, calling you to readiness, calling you to intimacy, calling you to watch. And then he was gone, and I was alone on that rocky outcrop in the Mojave Desert at 11:47 p.m., with the stars wheeling overhead and the wind carrying the scent of distant rain. But I wasn't the same person who'd driven out to that desert 4 nights earlier. Something fundamental had shifted in me. The alarm that had been a vague sense of urgency was now a clear call to action. The feeling that time was short was now a conviction that demanded a response. I spent the rest of that night in the desert, wrapped in my sleeping bag, watching the stars, praying, processing everything I'd been shown. As dawn finally broke, painting the desert in shades of gold and pink, I watched the landscape transform from darkness to light, and I understood that this was the metaphor Jesus had been showing me all along. The world is in darkness, but the light is coming. The bride is sleeping, but the alarm is sounding. The door is still open, but it's closing. And those who respond to the alarm, who wake up, who get ready, they're the ones who will be transformed from darkness to light when the bridegroom appears. I drove back to Los Angeles that morning, and I immediately began implementing what Jesus had told me: the 30 minutes of daily intimacy, the brutal examination of my life, the uncomfortable conversations with friends and family about the urgency of the hour, the releasing of my grip on plans and comfort and control, the daily practice of watching, of living in readiness, and I'm telling you, it's transforming everything. The 30 minutes alone with him each day has become the anchor of my life. It's where he shows me the areas that still need surrender, the relationships that need healing, the priorities that need adjusting. It's where I hear his voice with clarity I've never experienced before. It's where the oil from my lamp gets replenished daily. The examination of my life has been painful but necessary. I've had to cut off entertainment that was dulling my spiritual senses. I've had to end relationships that were pulling me away from him. I've had to change how I spend my time, my money, my energy. I've had to confront sins I'd been excusing and compromises I'd been tolerating. The warning of others has cost me. I've been called extreme, unbalanced, obsessed with the end times. I've lost followers on social media. I've had friends distance themselves from me. But I've also seen people wake up, get serious about their relationship with Jesus, start living with urgency and purpose. The open hands have required daily surrender. Every morning, I have to consciously release my grip on my plans, my career, my comfort, my security, and say, Lord, I'm yours. Take me wherever you want. Use me however you want. I'm holding everything loosely. And the watching, the daily awareness that he could return at any moment, has changed how I live every single day. I go to bed with my accounts settled. I wake up with expectancy. I make decisions through the lens of, what if he returns today? It's not easy. It's not comfortable. It's not what most Christians are doing, but it's what he commanded, and it's what separates the wise virgins from the foolish ones. Now I need to talk directly to you. You've watched all 4 parts of this testimony. You've heard what Jesus showed me. You've felt the alarm in your own spirit. That's why you're still here, why you haven't clicked away, why something in you is resonating with this message. So here's what I need you to do. First, I need you to commit to the 30 days. Today is your day 1. 30 days from today, you need to have established these 5 practices as non-negotiable parts of your life. Write down the date, put it in your phone, make it real. Second, I need you to start today with the 30 minutes, not tomorrow, not next week. Today, turn off your phone, get alone with Jesus, and spend 30 minutes in his presence. Tell him you're ready to hear what he wants to say to you. Ask him to show you the areas of your life that aren't ready. Listen for his voice. Third, I need you to do the examination. Get brutally honest with yourself. What would you be ashamed of if Jesus returned today? What would you regret? What needs to change? Write it down, and then start changing it today. Fourth, I need you to warn at least one person. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Have the uncomfortable conversation with a family member who's sleeping. Be willing to be misunderstood if it means someone else wakes up. Fifth, I need you to practice open hands. What are you gripping too tightly? What are you unwilling to surrender? What's competing with Jesus for first place in your heart? Release it today. And sixth, I need you to become a watcher. Start paying attention to the signs. Start living with the awareness that he could return at any moment. Start making decisions through the lens of readiness. I know some of you are thinking this is too extreme, too demanding, too focused on the end times. You're thinking about all the reasons why you can't do this, why it's not practical, why it's not balanced. And that's exactly the spirit Jesus warned me about. That's the voice of the foolish virgins, of those who think they have plenty of time, of those who prioritize comfort over readiness. But others of you, you're feeling something different. You're feeling a confirmation in your spirit. You're feeling the alarm getting louder, more insistent. You're feeling a conviction that you can't ignore, a call that demands a response. That's Jesus. That's the Holy Spirit. That's the alarm he's placed in you to wake you up and get you ready. I need you to leave a comment right now. I need you to make a public declaration of your commitment. Type out, I'm committing to the 30 days. I'm responding to the alarm. I'm getting ready. Because there's power in public declaration. There's accountability in making your commitment known. And there's encouragement for others who are feeling the same thing but are afraid to respond. And if you're serious about this, if you're truly one of the remnant Jesus is calling to readiness, hit that subscribe button, because I'm going to continue sharing what he shows me, continue sounding the alarm, continue calling the bride to wake up and get ready. This isn't about building a following. This isn't about views or likes or subscribers. This is about making sure that when the trumpet sounds, when Jesus appears in the clouds, when the door closes, you're ready, you're watching, you're one of the wise virgins with oil in your lamp. Let me tell you what's going to happen over the next 30 days if you commit to this. The alarm in your spirit is going to get stronger, not weaker. The urgency is going to intensify. The sense that time is collapsing is going to become almost overwhelming at times. But here's what else is going to happen. You're going to experience an intimacy with Jesus you've never known before. You're going to hear his voice with clarity you've never experienced. You're going to see areas of your life transformed that you've struggled with for years. You're going to develop a readiness, a preparedness, a joyful expectancy that will sustain you no matter what comes. And when he returns, whether it's in 30 days or 30 years, you won't be caught off guard. You won't be scrambling to get ready at the last minute. You won't be one of the foolish virgins desperately trying to buy oil when the merchants are closed. You'll be ready. You'll be watching. You'll be one of the ones who looks up and says, "Finally, I've been waiting for you." I want to end by taking you back to that desert one more time. 3 days ago, I drove back out there in the daylight. I wanted to see the place where Jesus had appeared, where he'd shown me these visions, where he'd given me these instructions. In the daylight, it looked completely ordinary, just rocks and sand and sagebrush stretching out under a blue sky. No supernatural light, no thunder, no visions. Just a desert that's looked essentially the same for thousands of years. But I knew something that wasn't visible to the natural eye. I knew that in that ordinary-looking place the extraordinary had happened. I knew that the eternal had broken into the temporal. I knew that the King of Kings had walked on that ground and spoken words that would change lives. Wake up, sleepers, prepare a bride. And that's what I want you to understand. The alarm Jesus is sounding in your spirit, it's not visible to everyone. Most people can't hear it. Most people explain it away. Most people silence it with distractions and medication and theology that prioritizes comfort over readiness. But you can hear it. You've been marked. You've been chosen to be part of the remnant that stays awake, that watches, that prepares. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to respond like the wise virgins, taking the alarm seriously and preparing accordingly? Or are you going to respond like the foolish virgins, acknowledging the alarm but putting off the preparation until it's too late? The door is still open. The oil is still available. The time for preparation is still here, but it's closing. It's running out. It's almost over. Jesus is coming. Soon. Sooner than most people think. Sooner than many are ready for. The alarm is sounding. The birth pangs are accelerating. The signs are converging. The season is here. And the only question that matters is, will you be ready? 30 days. March 17th, 2026. That's your deadline. That's when I want to hear from you again, telling me how the 30 days transformed your life, how responding to the alarm changed everything, how you're now living in readiness instead of complacency. But don't wait until then to start. Start today. Start right now. Turn off this video, get alone with Jesus, and spend your first 30 minutes in his presence. Ask him to confirm what I've shared. Ask him to show you what needs to change. Ask him to help you become one of the wise virgins who's ready when he returns. The bridegroom is coming. The trumpet is about to sound. The door is about to close. Be ready. Be watching. Be one of the ones with oil in your lamp. I'll see you in the comments. I'll be praying for every single one of you who commits to the 30 days, and I'll be watching with you, waiting with you, preparing with you, because we're not alone in this. We're part of a remnant, scattered across the earth, all feeling the same alarm, all responding to the same call, all getting ready for the same event. The rapture is close. It's not a coincidence that you're feeling it. It's Jesus calling you home, calling you to readiness, calling you to watch, answer the call, respond to the alarm, get ready. He's coming soon.